Welcome to our Israel-Palestine podcast, a project by graduating high school students from Berlin-Neukölln, home to Germany's largest Palestinian diaspora, and a second home to many young Israelis. Israel and Palestine are painfully present in our district and in our schools. We've spoken with historians, legal scholars, trauma researchers, and educators, some of whom are world-leading experts to better understand this ongoing conflict. Our approach has been multi-perspectival. We don't aim to resolve controversies or contradictions, but to hear different perspectives. Human rights and international law are the foundation of responsible multi-perspectivism. Can we learn to listen and hold conflicting truths at the same time? Find your own answers, or better, questions. Are you ready for the discomfort of learning?
Hi, I'm Alexandria.
Hi, I'm Yusuf.
Welcome to a new episode of a podcast on Israel and Palestine. Today we want to speak about the trauma legacies in the Middle East.
We are very honored and proud to have Rabbi Dr. Tirzah Firestone with us today. Welcome, Dr. Firestone. Thank you so much for making the time.
Happy to be here.
Welcome. We are very happy and grateful to have you here with us.
Dr. Firestone is an American analytical psychotherapist, rabbi, and author. She's a renowned Jewish scholar who is widely known for her groundbreaking work on Jewish feminism, Kabbalah, and transgenerational trauma legacies. She's a leader in the International Jewish Renewal movement and speaks internationally about trauma legacies. She is the author of the award-winning book Wounds into Wisdom: Healing Intergenerational Jewish Trauma. It was awarded the 2020 Nautilus Gold in Psychology, and in the same year, the award of Jewish Women's Caucus of the American Association of Women in Psychology. Furthermore, she lives with her husband, David, in Colorado. Hello.
Yes, you did that very well, Yusuf.
Thank you.
Very happy to be here with you.
Rabbi Dr. Firestone, we're so excited to have you. Can you share a little about your personal journey? What led you to become both a rabbi and a psychotherapist?
Yes, well, that is a very long story, which I don't think you want to hear the whole story today. I wrote a whole book about that. But let's suffice it to say that I've always been a seeker. I've never felt satisfied with what I was told to believe. And when I was your age, and I needed to go explore and find my own answers. And I went around the world looking for answers. And I always had in me a sense of, there's a mystery here. There's a much bigger mystery. Things aren't random. There's a reason why we're here. There's a reason why we have dreams, for instance. There's a reason why we have intuition. There's a reason why we have a drive to learn. Anyway, psychology was the answer for me, and also spirituality, because they both touch upon that sense of mystery. And I think that's a meeting place, a place where those two places kiss and come together. Okay, we'll leave it there.
Speaking of psychology, trauma is a word we hear often, but I believe it is not always understood to its full depth. How would you define trauma, especially in a collective or historical sense?
First of all, I'm going to light a candle right now.
Go ahead.
It has nothing to do with with that question, but it has everything to do, in a sense, because we're talking about heavy things. And so I'm making a little prayer that we open ourselves to a higher wisdom and a higher intelligence, to that mystery that we're talking about, this mystery that we can't really name. Science can't name it. Religion doesn't name it. It's the unnameable thing. So trauma is a word that is bantered about all the time, right? Kids come out of a movie theater and say, "Oh, that was traumatizing, that scary movie." It's a word that has little t and big T, right? As my friend Gabor Mate says, Trauma simply means a wound, right? It's Greek for wound. And Dr. Mate says that trauma isn't what happened to you. It's not the wound that happened to you, like the car accident that happened to you, or someone violated you that happened to you. It's what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you on the outside. Yeah. So that's one explanation. And I think that's very important. Is what happens to us inside. If our parents are crazy and treat us weirdly, or something happens to us that's really not fair, it's the meaning we make inside of us that we take with us. My friend Resma Menachem says trauma is anything that my body says is too much, too fast, too soon. It's like it assaults me. It overwhelms my ability to cope, and that's very important because that's happening all over the world. Okay, go ahead.
So, why is understanding trauma not just a personal concern, but also a crucial lens for understanding social and political conflicts?
That is the most brilliant question. These questions are so good. I just want to honor you for that. They're really remarkable. And I wish adults would ask me such good questions. So you're amazing. You're young adults, but I wish old adults would ask me such good questions. The reason why trauma matters on a worldwide level is because trauma lingers in our bodies and it makes us do things that we wouldn't ordinarily do. So it leaves leftovers. Do you know what that means? It leaves a residue and it changes us. And sometimes this is very, very important. It can change us in different ways. Trauma's effects linger in our bodies. The leftovers can make us numb and flat. And maybe you know people who are just like, they just don't get happy and they don't get sad and they're just blah. That's the effect often. It might be their personalities too, but it's often that something happened to them and it has left them dissociated, we call it. But trauma more often leaves us mad and hyper and I'm ready to punch you out at any time. You just look at me the wrong way and I'm going to punch you or I'm going to say something mean to you. Do you know someone like that? Have you ever met someone like that? They're always angry. They're ready to just like punch you. And that's a different kind of leftover in a body, but that's also the residue of trauma. And then there's also a residue that leaves us feeling horribly ashamed and lonely and guilty and feel bad about ourselves. I feel shitty about myself. And then the other thing that is very, very important to say here in the context of the Middle East and Gaza and Israel and all over the world is that when we go through trauma, let's say my family and me were, and I were discriminated against. Someone was horrible to us. That will leave a leftover in me that I will have to keep reenacting that trauma on myself or others. This is very important and very sophisticated idea, but it's people all over the world know this, that when a child, for instance, gets abused and someone violates them or they're mean to them, that child will grow up and will be mean to themselves or they will be mean to other people. So there's a saying that goes, and I think it translates in German too, hurt people hurt people. When I am hurt, then I hurt others, or I hurt myself again and again and again and again. And I keep repeating that cycle. So when I don't deal with my distressing past, my traumas, when I don't heal them, it changes me. And I have all these leftovers inside me. I can either be flat and numb, or I can be like that, or I can feel really guilty and ashamed and lonely, and always, I will want to heal that by reenacting, doing that injury again and again and again on myself or on other people. And the worst part of all of this is that trauma leaves us when we don't heal it, because you can always heal it. It leaves me prone to more illness. So children, for instance, I'm very sad to say this, but children in Gaza and children in Israel and children who have seen their parents killed in front of them, God forbid, just terrible, terrible things, that will weaken my whole immune system. Do you know what an immune system is?
Yes.
My physical being will be weak, and for the rest of my life, if I don't heal that wound, that trauma, I will be more prone to getting sick, bad sicknesses. So if you take that one person and you magnify it to 40,000 people, it's like, oh my God, it's terrible, because all these people are not in good shape, right? And then they will want to have more war, or they will want to feel they won't succeed in life in some ways. They'll be not well people. Okay, that was a very long answer, but it's a very important answer. Now I'm going to be quiet, and you can...
It was a long answer, and you've already partially answered the next question, which I'm going to ask anyway. As you've written in a book, you've written about how trauma isn't just personal, but it is passed down across generations, as you've already briefly mentioned. But how does it happen psychologically and socially? Could you elaborate that?
Yeah, it happens, first of all, physiologically, as we've said, in our nervous system. So if it happens in my nervous system, if something terrible happens to me and my whole family witnesses it, or it just happens to me, let's say, God forbid, I'm raped or abused in some way, my family gets affected because they're all so upset about me, and the whole community gets so upset about me. And then it keeps going in larger and larger circles. Now, in war, and when terrible things happen, like October 7th happens, Hamas comes in and does this terrible attack. The whole country of Israel is like affected in such a large way. And the trauma is still reverberates, and each person in Israel has an effect. They get numb, or they get mad, or they get ashamed, or they want to make war and get back. It makes me full of vengeance. And then they commit war. They go into Gaza and they decide they're going to just bring down all the buildings, and they're going to kill people who are innocent, looking for the murderers. Then we have this situation where there's trauma that makes more trauma, that makes more trauma, that makes more trauma. It goes back and forth. It's like this terrible chain of suffering that is very, very hard to stop. And the reason why we're talking about this, actually, the reason why this is in the news so much about trauma and about intergenerational trauma, is because there is science that now shows us that the effects of trauma linger, just like we said in the second question you asked. They linger, they keep going. So the children of the children of the children in Gaza, even though they didn't live through what we're living through, this horror that's happening, the children of the children of the children in Israel who died because of the Hamas attack, they too will feel the effects. And this is what's called intergenerational trauma that gets passed down 2, 3, and sometimes even 4 generations. So does that make sense? And I'm probably messing you up with your questions, but because I know you're going to ask me this probably, that the nervous system, my genes don't change, but my gene expression changes. How my genes express themselves is not going to be as clear and as bright and as intelligent when I've gone through something terrible. And that epigenetic change on top of the genes gets inherited, gets passed down to my children and to their children. We can talk about that more. You probably,
Exactly.
I bet you're so wise.
The next question.
You probably have a question about that. Go ahead, Alexandria.
So you already answered and explained in simple terms what epigenetics are, but can you also tell us what does it mean for communities with histories of war and displacement?
Yeah. Okay. So let me make this. I'm going to, I want to start back where this whole science started. Okay. So let me explain a little bit about epigenetics and how it works, in very simple terms, because I am not a scientist. I was never good at science or math, but I love the science that I understand at a very, probably, I'm saying this at a 7th grade level. So this is easy for you to understand too, and you probably are much more scientifically inclined. But this is important because there's individual trauma, but there's also collective trauma. When there's collective trauma, when a whole family or a whole group or a whole ethnicity suffers something terrible like war or displacement, like you're going to move, we're going to move you, or you have to move, or poverty because the system is so unjust. When a whole group or collective suffers trauma, that's something happens in their psychology. Science, their physiology affects their psychology, right? That's very important. My biography affects my biology. And then my biology affects my biography. And that's very important. If you didn't remember anything else about this, that's an important thing to remember, that physically, my science, my inner science affects my psychology and what I think about myself. So when there's collective trauma and a whole group suffers injury, then the nervous system of the whole group suffers. And the story we tell ourselves, my self-image, my self-concept, my story about who I am changes. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to get back to the science, I promise. Let's say this, that, and I keep going back because it's important to remember that trauma makes more trauma. Hurt people hurt people. So on October 7th, let's say this, October 6th, the Israelis are going around and doing their thing, and they're having a big music festival, and they're feeling great about life and having a great time. And then Hamas comes in and blows the music festival up and kills people and tortures people and cuts people's heads off. Horrible, horrible things. The whole group, a collective of Jewish Israelis, are so shocked and so traumatized, their story about themselves changes radically. Radically. Do you know what the word radical? Radically, it's like, on October 6th, I was safe and happy and having a great time and dancing around and music and free and having a blast. And October 7th and 8th and 9th, my story about life is radically changed. All of a sudden, I am not safe. I am not happy. I am a victim. Do you know what a victim means? Like I am the victim of your torture. I am weak. I am afraid. I am scared. I am freaked out. All of these things, my story changed 100%. Okay. On October 8th, all of that fear turns into rage. We're going to get them. We're going to kill them. No one treats us like that. So the government governments always seem to do this, manipulate people's fear and say, okay, we're going to go to war. We're going to show them. And this right-wing government in Israel decides to manipulate that fear and that changed story, that collective trauma, and go to war. And now the Gazans and also the Palestinian story, they start to be bombs are dropping and there's no food and there's no water and people are freaked out and there's no warning that their buildings are going to collapse, that their lives are going to be completely demolished. And so their nervous systems are going crazy, into panic and into hyperactivity. And their inner story, they weren't safe on October 6th. They were not safe. They were occupied. They were not happy. But it gets so much worse by October 8th and 9th and 10th. It is like my story about myself has become worse than it was. It was already bad, but now it's worse. Now I am really under fire and the whole world is not stopping this and the world is not caring. And where am I going to go? And nobody's there for me. And that story that the Palestinians tell themselves gets so much worse. So collective trauma is about the story we tell ourselves and the images that we carry that traumatize us and also what we must do about it. Okay, now we're going back to the science. I know I'm messing up your order terribly. Is it okay?
It's okay. Go on.
Okay. So now I want to take you back to the laboratory. Okay. This is going back to first because this all started in animal behavior labs. If I say a word that you don't understand, would you stop me?
Of course.
Okay, good. So please just stop me. Just to say,
problem.
No, we don't know what you're talking about. So in the animal laboratories, there's one very important experiment that was done that started this whole thing about epigenetics. And it's, like I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm going to tell you in 7th grade language. So it was about 10 years ago, about 2014, 2015, and they decided to take a bunch of mice and expose them to a chemical that smelled like cherry blossoms, acetaminophen, and it's a chemical that's a nice smell. But every time they put the smell, the nice fragrance, the nice smell into the cage of the mice, they gave an electric shock to the paw, to the foot of the mouse. So the nice smell and the shock always came together. And that means that their little brains neurologically fired those two things together. And that means that, what do you think happened? The mice became fearful and froze every time they smelled that smell, right? Yeah. Every time they came into the presence of that cherry blossoms, even when they didn't receive the shock. So one day, the scientists just gave them the nice smell, and the mice go crazy because they know their paw is going to hurt for a moment. So they go crazy, right? They freak out. Okay. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
And that's the way the brain works when you have two things together. So then the mice were bred. That means the mice had babies, and their babies had babies. And the grandbabies, 2 generations, the grandpups of the original mice who went through this cherry blossom experiment, had never met their grandparents, and they had never been exposed to the smell of the cherry blossoms. But the grandchildren were born, and as soon as they were given that smell, they freaked out. They weren't even given the shock. They just freaked out. It's like that smell and the fear of that smell got passed down 2 generations. So the grandchildren, the grandbabies of those first mice freaked out. And the research said, something happens. And they started to test, they call this epigenetics, because epigenetics means there's a gene, genetics, on top of, epi means on top of the gene, that something happened to the genes so that panic or that trauma that the grandparents went through got passed down, right? So they started working with human beings and looking to see what happened to human beings who went through a trauma. And they studied the next study, and then I'll stop here and you can ask your next question, which was very brilliant, was in the Nazi era. I think it was, 1944, I believe. I'd have to look this up. There was a winter that the Nazis created an embargo and didn't let any food into Holland and the northern European countries. They starved them, and they didn't let any food in. So the women who were pregnant during that starvation, people were eating like tulip bulbs and grass and hay, very much like is going on in Gaza today, very sadly. So these women who were pregnant during the 1940s, their babies were starving. And then the scientists tested not the babies, but the grandchildren of those women. And they saw that all kinds of medical and psychiatric problems happened to those babies. The babies didn't starve, the grandchildren never starved, but they carried the wound. They carried the trauma of the grandparents. So that's the way epigenetics works. It transfers, the trauma transfers generationally. Okay, go ahead.
You've provided us a truly magnificent example of epigenetics. Now, assuming trauma is inherited, are we doomed to repeat past patterns, or are there ways to consciously interrupt these cycles?
There are ways to consciously interrupt these cycles. And this is really important. So let me tell you a story, I think is the best way, because stories are the best. Okay. For example, there was a little boy, the Russians also were very, this is in the 30s, I believe, also did a terrible starvation, a man-made starvation. And in the 30s, and of Ukraine. This is before the war now, way before the war, years and years. And the Ukrainians were starving to death. Anyway, that happened. There was a little boy that I met recently who was the great-grandson of people who had suffered this starvation. He didn't know anything about his grandparents. He didn't know anything. And so it wasn't here. It was in his nervous system. It was in his body. Every time he was 10 years old, he would not leave the house without packing his backpack with food. He would pack his pockets full with snacks and treats, and he would always have food on him. He would never be caught without food. He always had food. So he wouldn't leave the house without. Now, why did he do that? his parents, like, oh my God, what is going on with our son? He's nuts. But if you look at, he's carrying this epigenetic trauma of fear of dying from no food. Let me tell you another story. Okay, so another story is that there was a woman who came to see me, and her 7-year-old daughter was very not well. She couldn't think back to being 7. She was in 2nd grade, roughly, and she couldn't be away from her parents. She could not have a play date. She couldn't go to school. She couldn't let her parents be out of her sight. So her mother came to me and said, we've been to the school counselors. We've been to family therapists. Nothing is helping. What do we do? So I sat her mother down. This little girl was named Shiraz, and I asked her about her family. And she drew me a family map. We call it a genogram it's like a family tree.
Yeah.
And she told the story about how her mother and father had escaped Iran. And the mother, my client, was in her belly, was in her mother's belly. She was pregnant with her at the time. And they escaped. They were very wealthy, and they took one shopping bag full of things. They escaped in the middle of the night on a donkey cart, sitting on big bundles of opium. And they escaped to Pakistan. And then they flew to Switzerland, and then they flew to Florida, to Miami. Anyway, they escaped, and that was like in 1982. And this woman was, her mother was pregnant with her at the time. Okay. So I said, well, that's very interesting, but what does this have to do with, tell me. I was looking at the family map and saying, that's one side of your family, but what about the other side of your family? What happened to that side of your family? And she said, I don't know anything about that. I said, well, just go home and ask. What happened to your father's side? Because the mother's side they all escaped. So she went home and she asked, and nobody would tell her. And there was a big family secret. What happened? And that night she called me and she said, I could hear there was crying in the background. And she said, my mother and father are very upset that I'm asking these questions. They won't tell me. I said, well, keep asking and come in, bring your mother in tomorrow. What happened was that this woman, Shiraz's mother, asked and asked until they uncovered a big secret. And the secret was that they had left behind a very ancient grandmother, a very old grandmother who was blind and couldn't see. And they were afraid that she would tip off the guards and she would say something that they would be caught. And so they never told her that they were leaving Iran, and they never said goodbye. And the old woman was so heartbroken that she died soon thereafter. She never said goodbye. She knew that her daughter-in-law was pregnant. Anyway, it was a terrible secret. And the parents, the grandparents of Shiraz, were so guilty and ashamed and felt so bad about it. And anyway, a long story long is that they cried and they grieved and all the shame came out and all the guilt came out. And why I'm telling you this is because that happened here and there was a big memorial, and my client just wanted to heal that by feeling all the feelings and getting that out. She was so angry that her parents had done that. But all of that was a big explosion in one side of the house. And another side of the house, this little girl, the 7-year-old girl, started to get better. And she started to heal, and she's demanded to go back to school. She wanted to get out of the house. She didn't even know what was going on with her parents, but she started to heal. It was as if all of the uncovering of that secret, feeling the grief, feeling the pain, letting go of all the secretly held poison and trauma and grief and crying tears and all of that stuff about the grandmother was affecting this little girl. How is that even possible? Does that make sense to you? It's not logical, but that's the way families work. Sometimes secrets and traumas that are hidden affect the children very greatly. So it was as if the separation trauma of her great grandmother over here was carried down to little Shiraz because they never said goodbye. And so she couldn't say goodbye to her parents. And she held on to them. But as soon as they healed this goodbye trauma, this separation anxiety trauma, the little girl was freed and she got well and she is now completely normal. Okay, that was a long story to tell you how that works in families, that sometimes something that happens here in the great-grandparents or the grandparents affects us. It affects you. And you don't even know why you're neurotic. You don't even know why you're strange or you're anxious or you feel ashamed, but something happened in your ancestors. Okay. When you face that stuff, when you heal that stuff, when you feel the feelings, things change. And this is the most important thing, is that awareness. How do you say awareness in German?
Bewusst machen.
What is it?
Bewusst machen.
Okay, good. So awareness can shift our biology. When we get, the lights go on, it's like, aha, oh my God, I get it. It's like this shame I carry, or this anxiety I carry, or this fear I carry. It didn't begin with me. It's mine, but it didn't begin with me. When I have awareness, it can break the pattern of trauma to me. So everything that we do in this field is very, very important. Like to know that my parents or my grandparents went through this terrible time of poverty or starvation or war, that understanding, I get it, turns the lights on, and I am no longer a victim. I'm no longer a captive, a hostage, you could say, to their trauma. Does that make sense? Okay, now I'll be quiet. I know I'm talking so much. I want to hear from you too.
So the Jewish people have experienced persecution over almost 2,000 years. Exile, exclusion, pogroms, and the Holocaust. How does that history still affect Jewish communities today?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've spoken so much. Why don't you tell me? What do you think? Because it's in the news every day, right? The terrible things. So, what do you think? How does it affect today's news? These things that have gone on. By the way, it's not only European Jews. It's also, like we just said, it's Iranian Jews. It's Persian Jews. It's Russian Jews. It's because there was discrimination also in the Middle East. And so it's Jews all over the world for whatever crazy reason. Do you know the word scapegoat?
Yes.
Okay, good. Is that, how do you say that in German?
Sündenbock.
Okay, so you have a word for it.
Yes, we do have a word for it.
Okay, so if for whatever crazy reason, Jews were scapegoats all over the world, and then they all, in 1948, roughly, I'm making it very simple, came to Israel. So the descendants of those traumatized people, persecuted scapegoats, all moved to the same neighborhood And they live in the same neighborhood. They live in this tiny country together. And they all carry intergenerational, many of them carry intergenerational trauma. Okay, so what did I say? What did I say about people who carry trauma and the trauma lingers in our nervous system? It's not our fault, but it makes us mad and it makes us ashamed and it makes us feel completely flat. I can't feel your feelings. I can't empathize. I have no empathy. Like all those people in one little country. What do you think happens in 2025? It's we start to see that in the news. I'd love to hear maybe just a sentence from you. What do you think you answer? This is a brilliant question that I wish adults would ask. But what do you think, Alexandria? What do you think?
So I think with this trauma, they'll be even more sensitive to any type of danger and react intensely on this.
Exactly. That's brilliant. Yes. They will react intensely. It won't be, oh, well, that's a very interesting thing that they attacked us. They won't think about it. It'll affect a certain part of their brain called the limbic brain, the emotional brain, the survival part of our brain, and it will get reactive. And I will react so intensely, especially when people who are in the government are traumatized descendants. They're descendants of trauma, but also when the people in the government are very ignorant and don't have self-awareness. Yeah. Yusuf, what do you think? Would you add anything to Alexandria's answer? What would you say?
I don't think there's anything to top her answer, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing now, you could say, this is very simplistic, of course, because there's also ignorance. There's also greed. You know what greed is? Like, there's also just plain hate and racism. But there's a lot of that going on. But there's also the effects, the residue of centuries of religious discrimination, and we carry that. So this is a mess. It's a mess, and yeah, what we're seeing here that we can't. The Israeli Jews cannot stop this war. So there are people like me. There are many people in Berlin that I met actually that are Israelis who came to live in Berlin who think this is crazy what's going on in the Gaza war and in the policies of the Israeli government because they just understand how trauma works or because they didn't have trauma in their families. And so there are people on the outside, Jews, who are saying this is crazy. So Yusuf, what other question do you have? These are just fantastic.
Coincidentally, speaking about religion, well, Judaism places a lot of importance on remembering. So can you explain why that is and in what way when can remembering painful history be healing and when harmful?
Wow. Intelligent question. It's very, very good. First of all, yes, many times in the Torah, we're told, remember what God did for you. Remember the beauty. Remember the holiness. So there's different rememberings. I think one of the reasons why Judaism has lasted this long for thousands of years, it's one of the oldest traditions in the world, is because we remember our ancestors and we listen to the wisdom of the ancestors. There's different inheritances. There's different legacies that our ancestors give us, right? And some of them are very, very good. some of them are very wise. And the prayers they wrote and the music they wrote and the way of connecting to God is so beautiful. And the values like caring for each other and the value of education and so many good things. I want to remember that. Those are good legacies, right? But then there's another kind of ancestral memory that is a kind of legacy inheritance that is not so good for me, right? That my body remembers. And it's like my ancestors told me, you will never be safe in the world. You will never belong in the world, or the world hates us and the world will always hate us because we're Jews. Now, I think that's just not true. There are good people and there are bad people. There are people who hate and there are people who love. And it's like everyone has inside of them the capacity for love. So, what do I want to remember? That's important because there are different legacies. I want to remember the good stuff. Now, in terms of the nervous system, let's just say this. I don't know about your ancestors, the two of you, but probably pretty interesting. Alexandria, where did your grandparents come from?
So on my one side, they're from Germany, but my other half were actually African American. So my grandma was actually a slave.
That's okay. Now you're opening up a whole new box because think about the African Americans and the trauma, the collective trauma that they carried, the unbelievable injustice that they lived through, and the trauma of being stolen and being kidnapped from their land and forced into slavery. I mean, that's shocking. It's just unbelievable, and the goodness, what came out of that. So in the same way, your people, that part of your family, anyway, that they have different legacies. They might think the world hates us because we have darker skin. The world was cruel to us, and they will always be cruel to us. That could be a legacy. But it's not a good legacy. But your ancestors also had amazing music and dance and resilience, right? Resilience. That means that they pop back. They're so good-natured and so fantastic people. Like, right? Their spirit is so strong, right? You should be proud of that. That's something that you want to remember, right? So it's really about what we choose to remember as well and choose to be proud of. And then we don't want to. It's like a plant. Those weeds. I don't want to water those weeds over there, but I want to water the good stuff. How about you, Yusuf? Where did your grandparents come from?
I actually have German, Czech, and Egyptian roots. So
wow.
Yeah,
okay, so German, Czech, and Egyptian.
Yes.
That's amazing. And did anyone that you ever knew come from Egypt?
Yes.
Wow.
My father's side is Egyptian, actually.
That's amazing. And do you speak Arabic?
I do understand it a little, but I don't speak it fluently.
Okay. I mean, someone speaks English in your home, that's for sure.
No.
No?
No, not at all.
Your English is so beautiful.
I try my best.
Wow, both of you are incredible. So you probably also, Yusuf, have inherited things that are brilliant and lovely that you want to keep going and you want to strengthen, the smarts, the wisdom, right? The resilience from your grandparents and great grandparents. Then there's probably stuff that, not so great. Every family has stuff that's like awful. You don't want to water that plant. But that's the way I feel in Judaism. I am very let's talk about Israel and Gaza now, okay? Well, maybe you have a question about that.
Healing requires a post-traumatic situation, an end of the traumatizing situation. What are the long-term consequences of ongoing trauma when there is no post?
Basically, a very simple and hard response is that you can't heal trauma when the injustices are still going on, right? So, use an example. Let's say I'm a woman that's getting raped continuously, or I am a person who's getting violated continuously, and that person goes to therapy, and the therapist tries to help them heal their trauma, but they're going home and getting raped again. Does that make sense? So it's a terrible example, but it's a vivid example that says the injustice is the bombs are still dropping until the end of war, until the Palestinians can breathe again, until there is a modicum, a bit of safety in their lives where they know it's going to be okay. They're not going to hear drones or bombs, that they can go to bed at night and sleep through the night without war. There's no healing that can happen. The injustices have to stop. The war has to stop first. And then maybe, how old are you guys?
I'm 19.
I'm also 19. Almost
Okay,
20.
good. Okay, so let's say there's a 15-year-old, a sophomore or a freshman in high school, and their whole life has been war after war after war. Of course, their safety level, their nervous system is shot. Their nervous system is completely, has been destroyed by all those sounds and images and bloodshed and cruelty. So, unfortunately, it's going to take their whole life. Let's say, God willing, there is peace. There is some kind of peace. There is some kind of reconciliation, and their life, for the rest of their lives, they live in peace. They have to work their whole lives to counter what they went through the first 15 years. And imagine a baby that's born into bloodshed, and we don't know what's going to happen with their children and their children's children. So war is just, I think we can all decide war is just stupid. It's not worth it. It's a terrible crime against humanity. Hamas, I have to say also, we have to say that Hamas did some horrible things, that they didn't really take care of their people, and put their people into terrible danger. And then the Israelis also did these terrible things. So it is a mental health nightmare, we could say, for these children, and they're going to need a lot of help. Yeah.
So if people are stuck in trauma responses, so fear, anger, shutting down, how can healing begin even in the middle of ongoing violence?
It can't. We can help to get food and water and shelter to these people. That's the only thing we can do right then. That has to come first. That has to come first. And safety. So where am I putting my head tonight? Where am I laying down my body so that I can become a healed animal? My animal self has to get healed first. Yeah. Yusuf, what do you think?
I agree. Yeah. Well, you did mention the atrocious feeling of living in times of war. And, well, in those times, healing can feel almost impossible. Have you seen examples in history or today where trauma-informed healing has led to real change?
Yes. Okay. So that's really important. And that's what I set out to write about in my book, in my last book. Ph.D., that the story that I told you about the little 7-year-old, that was an example of the family was messed up because they had this big secret and nobody talked about it. And as soon as it opened up, this little girl of the next generation all of a sudden was like, oh, she was freed. She was freed up from the ancestral trauma that she carried and didn't even know she carried. There are many stories of people who have what I call an awakening. Like all of a sudden the key turns here and they understand that their trauma didn't begin with them, that there is some precursor to it. There's something that happened in the background that they never knew about. So that was an example of the kind of when you have awareness, and that's maybe if you don't remember anything else, awareness, when the thing hits here and it's like you make a connection and there's this light bulb that goes off and it's like, get it. Even though it's a painful light bulb, it hurts to make that equation. It will change your life. It will stop the trauma. It will also change your actions, I think. It can change everything. It can change your destiny.
Okay, if someone listening wants to better understand trauma, both personal and collective, what are some first steps or resources you'd recommend?
Such a good question. It's important to read stories. You could read my last book, but there's Gabor Mate has amazing stories. It's good to read stories about this, like how does trauma work if you're not a scientist. But if you're if you have a scientist's brain, there's amazing books that you can read about the scientific research too. So I can give you a list of books with stories. I can give you a list of books with science, and I can give that to your teacher, and that would be really good. There's also amazing movies that you can watch about healing trauma. For instance, Dr. Mate has amazing movies that you can watch. So that's a very good question. So I'll follow up on that. How are we doing?
We've got one last question.
Okay, we're doing really well.
Well, many young people feel overwhelmed by the world, especially when looking at the current Israeli-Palestine situation. What's one thing you'd want to take away from this conversation?
I'd like to ask you that same question about what you would do. So maybe you can think about what you would say to that question. What's the most important thing you would like to remember or take away? But for me, my answer is, it's important. It's for everybody now, because the world is so turbulent and unstable and uncertain. We don't know where things are going. It's really important that we keep our nervous system good, regulated. We call it peaceful. And how do you do that? How can you do that when the world is so crazy and shaking? How do I stay calm? I do things that I love. So, like, for instance, I love music. I love yoga. I love hiking in nature. Those are the things that help me. I love petting my dog, right? I wish I could show you. My dog isn't here right now, but just holding my dog when I feel shaky. Those are things that I do to help me calm my nervous system. What do you do? What do you like to do, Yusuf? What do you like to do?
A very basic answer, but personally, I just not necessarily stroll in nature, but I just look at the sky and listen to music, perhaps.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Okay, that's a great answer. So you have like earbuds and okay.
Isolate myself from the world and just be in my own space for a little while.
Beautiful. Like you unplug from the world. And what's your favorite music?
Always these questions. I listen to a wide variety of music, so I can't specify anything specific.
Okay.
It's less about me and more about you. You have the stage here, so.
That's right. Whatever kind of music does it for you, and every one of us is different. Yeah. Alexandria, what about you?
Also listening to music and like doing anything artistic, like drawing, dancing, singing.
Great. Don't ever let them shut you down on that, right? I mean, someone might come and say, "Oh, that's so stupid to be dancing now, or listening to music because the world is going crazy." But no, it's exactly the opposite. You need to hold on to those things and never let them shut you down. Art is a very, very important one to keep expressing yourself and to keep feeling your feelings and to keep looking at the sky and trees and birds. Yeah, so good. You guys are awesome. You're really awesome. A big bow to you.
Thank you.
A big assalamu alaikum, shalom aleichem to you. You're amazing.
Thank you for listening. If this conversation was meaningful or unsettling, if it left you with answers or more questions, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time on our Israel-Palestine podcast.